In our post-Christian, post-Enlightenment, overeducated love affair that we have with reason, it's really easy to dismiss an actual devil as silly, superstitious. Although there may not be any horns, red lights, or pitchforks involved, there are dark forces that seek to deny God and His goodness. We're exposed to enough 24-hour day, around-the-clock news, not to mention human history, to know that there's evil with a capital E in the world and is personified by the devil. Now, we might be tempted to think that today's gospel is all about the choice between good and evil. But the thing about Christ's temptation wasn't Satan saying, well, if you're the Son of God, then slaughter all your enemies. Or, if you're the Son of God, throw all the sinners into concentration camps. Now, most of us wouldn't have much of a problem declining such obvious evil, would we? But if we read between the lines, what Satan was actually saying to Jesus was this: if you are the Son of God, then use your privilege and position to indulge yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but that's something I'm comfortably familiar with. Maybe the central point of the gospel for us today is not so much trying to avoid temptations as it is having our eyes open as to how we've already succumbed to them. To the point that we don't even see them anymore. I mean, if the moral Christian life was all about avoiding the big stuff, then most of us would have arrived already. And I think the majority of us, anyway, can pretty easily avoid murder, rape, armed robbery, and the like. And we can probably pull it off without much help from God at that. Maybe the central point of this gospel, more accurately, is not resisting temptation to do something big and ugly, but to see that even what seems good has a dark side to it. That there are some things that seem good that we want to justify and defend holding on to. Things that diminish us and our dignity as children of God. You know, St. Augustine, in his book Confessions, searches for the root cause of sin. And he goes through this, that, and the other thing, and eliminates all of it, and then finally asks if perhaps we find enjoyment in doing evil. But he dismisses this as nonsense. No one, he says, commits evil for the sake of evil, but for the sake of something good. Augustine states that sins are committed when out of an immoderate liking for things, since they are the least goods, we deserve the best and the highest good, which are God, His truth, His love, and His law. And it all begs a few questions. At what point do our indulgences become entitlements, and our entitlements become needs? How do these false needs become ways to protect ourselves from the pain of being human? And how do these protections become so much a part of us that we no longer see them for what they truly are? I think that the discipline of Lent is to peel even just the thinnest layer of this insulation away, to remove even a single numbing agent that we use to insulate us from pain, from frustration, from isolation, and from despair. To insulate us from those times where we find ourselves in the desert of life. You see, friends, we need Lent, both individually and as a church. When the luster of our rich tradition of devotion wears off and faith becomes ho-hum, we find it pretty easy to become devoted to our comforts instead. The soft couch, the flannel sheets, the 55-inch flat screen, the beef medallions in béarnaise sauce. Pretty simple. We find no contradiction between being comfortable and being Christian. And it gets real hard to tell us apart from the population in general. We start to blend in, avoid extremes. We become nice instead of holy. Our church, in its inspired wisdom, has chosen since ancient times to voluntarily enter the desert of Lent and remove at least a layer of comfort. We give things up. We look for what we cling to and lay it down. It's really a curious practice moment, and it's far from perfect. This thing of denying ourselves for 40 days out of the year. We give up chocolate or Facebook or TV or gossiping or any of the other forms of anesthesia we numb ourselves with. And it's easy to think that we're doing God a favor by all this self-denial. Like we're gathering up a big basket of candy bars and arrows on Facebook to give to God like some bad habit charity drive for the Almighty. And if there's one less Butterfingers bar in that basket because I succumbed to temptation and ate it, then it's all flop, sweat, and failure. Like we just dropped lead on the floor and it shattered to a million pieces. The point of Lent isn't that God needs our sacrifices. The point is we need God. In reading today's gospel for about the 1,000th time, I kept wondering what in the world the good news was for us in it. I mean, it's comforting to think that Jesus understands suffering and temptation. It's comforting to think that God had an almost unnervingly human experience. But I'm just not all that sure how helpful it is. Is it helpful to me or you that the Son of God resisted temptation? Like, okay, Jesus did it, so I can do it too. But somehow that just feels grandiose and misguided. It's like so much human bravado. It's not about thinking that we can be Jesus, and it's not about impressing God by giving Him our candy bars. It's all about seeing our layers of insulation for what they are. Stuff that we have created to use to feel safe, comfortable, and cared for, without God getting in the way. Because the reality is that which we are constantly trying to insulate ourselves from, that harsh desert reality that we're trying to avoid through our anesthesia of choice, is the very place where God insists on being present to us. Because the good news is that this gospel reading today doesn't say, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil, and then waited in a lobby till he came back out. The Spirit of God is present to us in all of our deserts. In Jesus Christ, God has come to be present in all the things we would rather avoid. So as the numbness of self-indulgence starts to wear off this Lent, lean into this God of the desert. This God in whom we live and move and have our being. As even a single layer of insulation is peeled away, know that you and I can leave it behind because God actually loves us, cares for us, and passionately believes in us. It's his job description. Ours is to just let him be